Let's face it, you don't buy a Volkswagen Beetle if practicality is at the top of your agenda, so why not go the whole hog and opt for a soft top? The third generation Beetle Cabriolet is strong on style and looks a really great ownership proposition. It's everything its predecessor needed to be.
Oscar Wilde tells us that the only way to get rid of temptation is to yield to it. And if you're amongst those who've always promised themselves a modern, affordable, yet nostalgically styled new convertible, then what you might well be thinking of yielding to is something like this, Volkswagen's third generation Beetle Cabriolet. This, of course, is the soft-top version of one of the most iconic cars ever built. First introduced back in 1949 and still in production over half a century later, by which time over 330,000 open-top Beetles had been sold. In 2002, the same Mexican factory that had made the final classic models began producing a so-called new Beetle Cabriolet, and nearly 250,000 of these were made before production finally ended in 2010 to make way for the car we have here. Bigger, better equipped, with superior engine wear and much improved quality, this newer Cabriolet arrived in the spring of 2013 and has proved to be a definite step up market, even though it still remains the most affordable route into Volkswagen's soft-top ownership. It's also rather unique in the affordable drop-top segment, offering the kind of character you simply don't get in soft-top versions of ordinary family hatchbacks. The kind of rear seat space you'd never find in a convertible Mini, and the sort of proper wind-in-the-hair experience that can't be fully replicated by cars like the Fiat 500c and the Citroën DS3 Cabrio that aren't fully fledged convertibles. A new kind of nostalgia then, in a new kind of Beetle. Let's put it to the test. The old post-millennium Beetle convertible was a boulevardier machine, happily transporting ladies who lunched from treadmill to tanning salon as they whiled away their empty days. Questions of ride and handling simply weren't asked by likely owners, which was just as well because by and large the chassis wasn't up to answering them. Those looking for that could go off and buy a convertible Mini, and increasingly many did. All of which has earned this replacement third generation soft-top Beetle a preconceived reputation it doesn't really deserve. You see, it shares almost nothing with its predecessor. As a driver, you sat properly forward rather than somewhere vaguely near the middle of the thing. Over bumps, the car doesn't shake and rattle about as if it's about to fall to pieces. Put your foot down, and you actually make meaningful progress forward. And there's no ridiculous bud vase in the centre of the dash to make the whole design so annoyingly gender specific. I mustn't get carried away, of course. Despite a 20% improvement in body stiffness, there's none of the go-kart eagerness of a Mini convertible. But then in this Volkswagen you also do without the Mini's awful ride, wobbly body and cramped cabin. That's a trade I think most will be quite happy to make, especially now that this Beetle is so much more dynamically adept and so impressively refined roof up. The steering's still a bit vaguer than I would like, but at least the car now feels more willing to change direction when you ask it to, especially in the pokier petrol guises like the one I'm driving here that get the XDS electronic differential lock system that was developed for the last generation Golf GTI. Now this lightly brakes the inside front wheel through tight bends, sharpening turning and ensuring that all the power gets onto the tarmac. It's rather surreal to feel all this working beneath you in a car that, as an enthusiast, you approach with such low expectations. Without this trickery, lower-order Beetle Cabrios are less able on the twisty stuff, but then potential owners of these models won't be looking to throw their cars around. What they're more likely to notice is an accomplishment that most compact convertibles really struggle with: truly excellent standards of ride, thanks to a high-tech multi-link rear suspension setup that isn't fitted to most tin-top Beetles and can't be found on lower-order Golfs either. As a result, though you feel really poor services, you do so far more remotely than would be the case in most other small soft tops. Onto the roof, a beautifully tailored, multi-layered piece of heavy-duty fabric that at the press of a button rises up in 11 seconds, folds away in 9.5 seconds, and is operable at speeds of up to 31 miles an hour. That's in contrast to the similar soft top fitted to the Golf Cabriolet that requires you to slow right down to 18 miles an hour before the electrics will work. You'd be amazed by how much difference that extra 13 miles an hour makes in day-to-day usability. Like all proper convertibles, you'll find it a bit blustery when driving al fresco unless you put the windows up. But with the optional wind deflector in place across the rear seats, things improve considerably. As for engines, well, they're all borrowed from the older Mark VI model Golf, so in other words, a couple of generations more modern than those supplied in the previous generation version of this car. There's decent power on offer for those who really want it, a 200 PS 2-litre TSI petrol unit from the old Golf GTI that makes 62 miles an hour in 7.6 seconds on the way to 139 miles an hour. That's the unit I've got here. Or you could go for a 140 PS 2-litre TDI diesel that manages 9.9 seconds and 122 miles an hour. I'm not sure though that I'd bother with either. This isn't the kind of car that's really at its best driving at those kinds of speeds. Which leaves us with the variants that will account for almost all UK sales. The two main versions, an eager 1.2 litre TSI petrol and a 1.6 litre TDI diesel. Both develop 105 PS and make 62 miles an hour in around 12 seconds en route to 111 miles an hour. If you've a little more in the budget though, and wouldn't mind a little extra punch, then don't ignore the 160 PS 1.4 litre TSI petrol unit, which manages 8.6 seconds and 128 miles an hour and could very well be the prime pick in the range. Urban folk who don't want the slick 6-speed manual gearbox also get DSG auto transmission options at the top and bottom of the lineup, with an older 6-speeder available on the 2-litre TDI and a more efficient 7-speeder available on the base 1.2 litre TSI. A new original. Is that what this is? Volkswagen reckons so, and you can see why. As with the fixed-top coupe version, the aesthetics of this design have far more in common with the classic post-war original than was the case with the 2002 new Beetle Cabriolet. That car's semicircular wings defining jokey cartoon strip looks. Here the styling is bolder, more dynamic and more masculine, incorporating much more of the feel of Dr. Ferdinand Porsche's early people's car, most notably in the large wheels plumply positioned beneath flared flowing arches. So there's something of the past, artfully mixed with a sporty vision of the future in a car that's longer, lower and wider than its predecessor with a longer wheelbase. It's also an awful lot stiffer, thanks to copious body strengthening across the floor and thicker A-pillars, which is why it won't judder about so much over the bumps. Most small soft tops need vibration dampers to try and take care of that, but this Beetle doesn't need them. On to the electrically folding roof, which incorporates a proper heated glass rear window and powers back in just 9.5 seconds to sit in typical pram-like fashion over the boot and block your view rearwards. Now, don't even think about buying this car without the rear parking sensors that are only optional on base models. That apart, there's little to complain about, unless you object to having to fit the tonneau cover that comes with the car, there to smarten up the folded sandwich of fabric. I'm guessing that most of the time, if you own this car, you probably wouldn't bother. Die-hard cabrio drivers who insist on continuing top down in the rain will find that the furled hood catches part of the water, then drops it on your passengers' heads when you put the roof up, a process that occupies 11 seconds. But I'm nitpicking here. This is at least a proper, fully fledged convertible, unlike the giant fabric folding sunroof you get on rival soft-top Fiat 500s and Citroën DS3s. And impressively, the electric roof operation is almost silent, in contrast to the asthmatic creaks and groans you get in a convertible Mini. One of the advantages of the way that the roof sits proud of the passenger compartment just above the integral rear spoiler is that it doesn't take up boot space, which is pretty reasonable for this class of car at 225 litres, 24 litres more than the previous model could offer. Enough if you negotiate the rather narrow loading bay for a couple of small suitcases, and about double what you get in an open-top Fiat 500 or Mini. If that's not enough, you can fold down the rear seat backs using these neat levers, freeing up a lot more space. That's assuming that you're not using the back seats, of course. Unlike many of its rivals in the small convertible sector, this car has a big enough cabin to comfortably take 4 adults for short to medium journeys anyway, providing that the occupants aren't excessively tall. Those that are will appreciate a design that's freed up 12mm more headroom than was offered in this car's predecessor. When these chairs aren't in use, I'd advise that you try and use the removable wind blocker whenever possible. It makes a big difference to the cabin turbulence and stows away in a special slot in the top of the boot when not needed. And up front, well, as promised, the interior does indeed feel more akin to that of the original post-war Beetle, in the unlikely event that you remember one of those, with the slab-sided dash the same colour as the paintwork in most models, even if it's no longer fashioned from crudely painted steel. The twin glove boxes are a nod to the early car too, which is nice, but just as tiny, which isn't. In real-time use, the elastic straps over the door bins, supposed to be able to hold a 1.5 litre bottle, aren't really very practical either. There's more use of hard plastics in this Mexican-built model than you'd find in a German-made Golf, but they all seem tough and potentially long-lasting. You sit much further forward than you did in the previous generation version of this car, closer to the swept-back front windscreen, viewing a big central speedo flanked with rev counter and ancillary gauges, and viewing it all through a sporty 3-spoke thin-rim wheel. You'll look in vain for the Mark II Beetle's dash-mounted flower vase, though. Good. Top models like this one also get a triumvirate of additional dash top dials as standard: turbo pressure, stopwatch and oil pressure, which seems as if it'd be a bit superfluous to the lightly needs of typical cabriolet customers. Now, compared to what you'd pay for a fixed top Beetle, there's a model for model premium of just under £3,000 to find for this soft top version, leading to pricing mainly pitched in the £19,000 to £26,000 bracket. All of which saw this as the most affordable of the 3 compact convertible models that Volkswagen offered at the time of this car's launch, despite the fact that it's made all the way across the Atlantic in Mexico. A Golf Cabriolet with the same engine would cost you an extra £2,000 to £3,000, or maybe even more, depending on the model that you're looking at. The pokier engines at the top of the Beetle Cabriolet range are also shared with Volkswagen's EOS, but that car has a metal folding roof rather than a soft top, which accounts for its model-for-model premium of around £4,000. This car, though, has a very individual appeal, and I'm guessing that if you really want one, then you won't really want a Golf or an EOS. So what are the alternatives on offer from other brands? Well, let's start at the foot of the range. The base sub £20,000 entry-level petrol 1.2 TSI variant is there as an alternative to cabrios in the cheapest sector of the market. Well, I say cabrios, Actually, there's only one fully open-top design in this particular part of the segment, the Mini Convertible, which will save you a couple of thousand in entry-level 1.6 litre petrol form, and even more than that further up the range, but is significantly smaller. The other two cheap soft tops you could consider, Fiat's 500c and Citroen's DS3 Cabrio, both have fixed side panels and what amounts to a huge electrically retracting fabric sunroof on top. As a result, of course, both are less expensive than this Volkswagen, but you may feel that what they provide doesn't actually deliver the real thing. It's an interesting debate, but it'll be irrelevant to the majority of potential Beetle Cabriolet owners who will be looking at mainstream petrol and diesel variants of this car, priced in a £20,000 to £25,000 bracket that pitches them against less characterful convertibles based on family hatchbacks. So not only Volkswagen's own Golf Cabriolet, but also cars like Renault's Megane CC, Peugeot's 308cc, and at the top end maybe even the BMW 1 Series convertible. Ultimately though, it's pretty difficult to buy a comparable version of any of these cars for much less than £25,000. So you're looking at paying out several £1,000s more than you would for an equivalent version of this Beetle. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Beetle Cabriolet that you really, really want, then whichever engine you settle upon, 1.2, 1.4, or in this case 2 litre TSI petrol, or 1.6 or 2 litre TDI diesel, then you're going to want a decent level of standard equipment to be fitted before you get into the inevitable realms of personalisation. And by and large, you should be reasonably happy with what's on offer. Apart from the electric hood and tonneau cover that's part and parcel of the Beetle Cabriolet package, all models get a rear spoiler, power windows and mirrors, air conditioning that also cools the glove box, a trip computer, a decent quality iPod compatible 8-speaker stereo with an aux-in socket and digital radio, plus a hill holder clutch to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. The two top petrol engines also get the XDS differential lock system that improves handling through fast bends. Beyond that, of course, it depends on your choice from the wide range of charismatic trim levels and the lengthy options list. Colour choice will be important, and on certain trim levels your choice of shade can be extended inside the car to allow for matching body coloured dash and door panels, something you can then set off nicely with optional 3-colour ambient lighting. And beyond that, well, I'd certainly want the wind deflector, which makes a big difference to in-car turbulence when you're not using the back seats. Another box you definitely should tick is that for parking sensors, which unfortunately cost extra on basic models. They're really essential on any small convertible, as you'll discover the first time you have to reverse into a tight spot. Bluetooth phone compatibility costs extra at the bottom of the range too. What I wouldn't mind paying extra for on top models is the 10-channel 400-watt Fender sound system I have here, with its boot-mounted subwoofer and switchable 3-colour front speaker illumination, part of an optional ambient lighting system that can bathe the cabin in shades of either red, white or blue. Safety kit runs to twin front, side and curtain airbags, Isofix child seat fastenings and anti-whiplash head restraints, plus all the usual electronic assistance for traction, braking and stability control. And as you'd expect on any well-developed modern convertible, there's a standard rollover protection system that pops up from behind the rear head restraints in milliseconds if certain lateral acceleration or tilt values are exceeded. Like most open-top cars, this one weighs more than the tin-top version upon which it's based, with the extra body reinforcement and rollover protection adding 114 kilograms to the curb weight. Obviously, that has an effect on fuel and CO2 figures, but in this case it's not too great, increasing these by around 5% over those of the fixed-top Beetle model that Volkswagen insist we should call the coupe version. If running costs are a key concern, then you'll naturally gravitate towards the 1.6 litre TDI diesel Blue Motion technology Cabriolet variant. Thanks to a stop-start system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in the lights or waiting in traffic, this model is able to return 62.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and put out 118 grams per kilometre of CO2. And to put that into perspective, well, it's some way off the standard set by a smaller rival mini convertible Cooper D. But potential Beetle owners will be looking at pretty much the same kind of returns that they'd get from a base diesel Golf Cabriolet or Renault Megane CC. And they'll be doing about 10% better than they would be in a rival Peugeot 308cc 1.6 EHDI. Elsewhere in the Beetle Cabriolet range, the story's very similar. Yes, you can get lower running costs from a smaller soft top like a Mini or a Fiat 500c, but if your search is centering on affordable convertibles that can actually take 4 people and more than a token amount of their luggage, then you'll find that this Volkswagen's returns are pretty par for the course. Choose, for example, the larger capacity 2-litre TDI 140 diesel, and you're looking at 55.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 134 grams per kilometre of CO2, a fraction ahead of a comparable Peugeot 308cc 2-litre HDI and a fraction behind a rival BMW 118D convertible. Opt for this top diesel Beetle with a 6-speed DSG auto gearbox and your returns will be hit by about 10%. Automatic motoring, though, in petrol form can actually save you money. That's because here Volkswagen is able to use its more modern 7-speed DSG auto technology, which when mated to the 1.2 litre TSI entry-level petrol engine improves combined cycle fuel consumption from 46.3 to 47.9 miles to the gallon and CO2 from 142 to 139 grams per kilometre. Pokier petrol engines come only with the 6-speed manual gearbox. So how do they fare? Well, the 1.4 TSI 160 variant manages 41.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 158 grams per kilometre of CO2, while the top 2-litre TSI 200 model that I'm driving here manages 37.7 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 174 grams per kilometre of CO2. At least you should be able to keep maintenance costs in check fairly easily. Volkswagen offers a choice between fixed servicing for low mileage cars and a flexible servicing program for those covering more than 10,000 miles a year. Using the latter program, it's possible to drive for up to 20,000 miles or 24 months without a major service. Best of all, perhaps, it's a bomb-proof bet that residual values are going to stand up very well indeed, as is usual with the Volkswagen brand. That leaves insurance groupings that start at 14 or 15 for the 1.2 TSI, rising to 16 for the 1.6 TDI diesel, then 21 for the 2-litre TDI diesel, 22 or 23 for the 1.4 TSI petrol, and finally 27 for the 2-litre TSI petrol. Like the idea of a Beetle Cabriolet? Then you'll like this one very much indeed. If you don't, then nothing your local Volkswagen salesperson will say about the more efficient engines, the better driving experience and the extra boot space is likely to convince you. Retro design is like that, which is why Volkswagen also offers a soft-top Golf for those who can't really see the point. That's arguably a more sensible choice, but then whoever bought a small convertible for sensible reasons? A car like this is and should be an indulgence, a bit of fun, exactly like soft-top Beetles have always been. And after years of being viewed as a novelty car whose appeal had long worn off, this Volkswagen's back as a hot ticket in this segment. Will that last? Well, who knows? Mini has shown that retro styling can have durable appeal, and this Beetle Cabriolet seems to have embraced its heritage a lot more cleverly than its predecessor. Perhaps the best bit about this bug, though, is that even if the novelty does wear off, you're left with a very good car, and that's a very welcome Plan B.